So in the last lesson I talked about variables in ActionScript, and I said they were ways of storing data in computer programs. In ActionScript there's a very specific syntax to set them up. There's a var keyword, the variable name, a colon, the variable type, and then the rest of it is flexible. In this case it's equals 0. In the next example, which is a boolean, it uses new boolean. And the new keyword, as you recall, is always associated with an object type of variable. An int is an example of a primitive variable, and that's similar to how computer hardware stores data, whereas an object is associated with or can contain functions and properties. Properties in themselves are variables, so they're a more complex type of data storage. And the objects that you've come across so far, boolean, number and string, these are all unusual in Flash because you can set them up. In fact, without using the new keyword, I could have just put, in place of new boolean, in parentheses false, I could have just put false. And you can see here with the number there's no new keyword used. With the string, again, there's no new keyword used. These are like irregular verbs in a language. They have a specific ways that you can, if you wish, to set them up. And they're also some of the most common objects that you'll come across in Flash, but the vast majority of objects will require you to use this new keyword when you instantiate them. So in this lesson I want to talk about using something called Adobe LiveDocs. And Adobe LiveDocs allows you to find out how to use the functions and properties of any object. And it has a URL, it's a website, and I've given it here. And I want to use it in this lesson to investigate string functions and properties. So let's have a look. The URL is quite complex, so it's easy to go to a search engine and then just type in Adobe LiveDocs. You can see it's come out at the top there. So that's the link I've given you. I've already got it up on my screen, in fact. So I said I was going to search for a string, and there's a search box up here, which I can type in string, and then go search. So I found the string. It's the top entry, so I just click on that. You can see it's a string AS3. If you're not on the ActionScript 3 version of LiveDocs, then you'll need to change your URL. I can scroll down a bit. It says there's public properties. Don't worry about what public means for the moment. And also public methods, which is another way of saying functions. And you can see there's actually nothing listed underneath here. The reason for that is that I haven't set a runtime, and you may remember from several lessons ago that you can use ActionScript to target various different operating systems. If I wanted to use Air, I will be targeting perhaps desktop or mobile applications. If I wanted to use Flash Player, I will be targeting the internet. And so I'm going to target Flash Player in this case. So I'm just going to click on that. You can see that some properties and methods have appeared. The reason that they won't appear unless one of these is selected is because objects can have different properties and methods depending on the type of software you are creating and what you are targeting. Are you targeting a desktop or are you targeting the internet? Because you can have different functions potentially available to you if you are targeting different software platforms. So let's have a look at the first and only property of a string, and that is something called length. And the length of a string tells you how many characters are in that string. And as I said, a property is a type of variable associated with an object. And as it is a variable, it has a type associated with it as well. In this case, it's an int. And the reason they've chosen to use an int to define the length variable is because you can only have a whole number of characters, and ints will only store whole numbers. So it makes sense for the length property to be an int. Let's have a look at using the int property. I showed you this software in this application in the last lesson. It just outputs the property to output text. So let's have a look at the length property. I've made a string here, var my variable :string equals, and then I've put a string. And I've said this string has 29 characters. And we can find out if that statement is correct using my variable .length. To use functions and properties, you need to use the dot syntax. So this is finding the length of this particular string. So I'll go control test, and it is indeed 29 characters. So let's have a look now. If I wanted to find out more information about the length, I could either click on this URL, or I could scroll down to where it says length, and then it will give me some more information. The same is true for all these functions. Let's have a look at the first function to see what that is. You can see it's got the same name as the object itself. It's a string, and that's called the constructor. And the constructor is a way of telling you, in this case, how to instantiate the object. So you can imagine that there should be a new keyword here. So you put var my variable :string equals new string, and then parentheses, and then it says you can put inside the parentheses a string. And you'll find a constructor associated with all objects. It tells you what you can put inside the parentheses, or in many cases what you have to put inside the parentheses in order to set one of these up. So in the case of a string, you don't actually have to, because as I said, it's one of these kind of irregular verbs. You can set it up with double quotes instead. But the formal way of setting up, instantiating an object, is to use the new keyword and then putting a string inside those parentheses. And it will give exactly the same result if I compile that. 29 characters in that string. So that's all that is meant by the first function there. The rest are in alphabetical order. The first one is just different. It's a constructor. So let's have a look at the car@, which is a proper function of this string object. So instead of saying length, I'm going to say car@, and let's find out what car@ does. Returns the character in the position specified by the index. The index is in the parentheses. So it's saying that if I put a 0 inside car@, it will come out with the first character of that string. If I put in a 1, it will come out with the second character of the string. So let's test that. I'm going to put a 0 in. I'm expecting it to be a capital T. Control test, and it is. If I put a 1 in, expecting it to be an H, and it is. And this convention of starting at 0 is used quite frequently in Flash, so it's worth getting used to the fact that the 0 is the first thing, the 1 is the second thing, the 2 is the third thing. Of course, that is very often the case in ActionScript. Let's have a look at concat. Concat combines strings together to make a larger string. So I just need an extra string here that I can concatenate var my new string equals plus a bit. So I'm going to concat my new string onto my variable. So I should have a larger string of those two joined together, and that's what has happened. There are other ways. There's another more commonly used way of concatenating. That is to use a plus. So I control test that, it's done the same thing. Another way of doing it would be to put in the double quotes directly and removing that string object altogether. And that would come out with the same result. And I think we've seen enough of those for the moment. You can have a look at more of those yourself if you wish. But I'm going to leave you with a challenge just to make sure you understand how to use Adobe LiveDocs. So create a number variable and store 1.2345678 inside it. Then use LiveDocs to find out how to set the value to 2 decimal places. So it'll look like this, 1.23. Then cast the output to a string. You'll remember in the last lesson I told you how to cast one variable type into another variable type, and then concatenate the casted output with a currency sign. It can be a pound sign or it can be another currency sign, and in order to give something that looks like a currency amount, so £1.23 in this case. And I'll go through how to do this in the next lesson.